Hi, everybody, and welcome to Remesh's conversation with a number of HR professionals out there. Thank you for taking the time to join myself and Andrew Conyer. Andrew is the founder and CEO of Remesh. I am Simon Drinkwater. I'm the Vice President of Enterprise. And today we're going to be talking to you about the benefits of HR and how that is applied to employee engagement. So thanks very much, and I'll hand over to Andrew to introduce the company.
Cool, yeah, so thanks, Simon. So I guess just to give you a little bit of context of where we're coming from at this and how these people like us who are AI nerds are starting to wade into the HR world, I'll give you a little bit of story of how we came to be and where we are, and hopefully we'll use that to continue the conversation. So about 4.5 years ago, I was a PhD student working on theoretical physics and AI research, and I decided to approach the problem of understanding large groups of people. So initially, I was interested in it from a geopolitical perspective. So how can I engage a country's worth of people and represent those people to their leaders, and started working on this problem of how do I engage people? So if you want to represent citizens, you have to engage them. Then once I engage them, how do I represent them? And so in this case, it requires using AI. And so over the past couple years, we've built out this capability that allows a single person to engage in live real-time conversation with hundreds or thousands of people simultaneously. And it might sound crazy, but what we do is we use AI to make sense of what all of those people are saying as they're saying it in real time, so that we can respond to it and engage with it and adapt with it. Over the past few years, while initially we started to be used a lot in the market research world, so people would use us to engage their customers, understand their customers, and make quicker business decisions, over the past year or so, we've had a really fast growth in people using us in the HR capacity. So that means using it to engage and understand employees. And so admittedly, we're a little bit new to exactly the subtleties of how HR and engagement works, but I think we have definitely a unique perspective, being that we came in as AI nerds and are now in the world of trying to create engagement. So just to reference a few things you're probably seeing on screen here. So just to reference, I guess, a few things that aren't on your screen, but are on the screen facing me. So that is that kind of we aren't just in the startup phase anymore. So we've been on the market for a while. We're used by a good dozen or two of Fortune 500 companies to make really important decisions. But we have this really important mantra to us, which is if we get a little closer to understanding each other, then the world will be a better place. And we think this is true for employees as well. So while we're having our conversation, we're going to be trying to engage you using our platform. So those of you who are online probably see a sidebar with some conversation happening. And our friend Emma, will you come say hi real quick? So it's actually not me running this because my iPad skills aren't that good. It is Emma, who you'll see in 1 second with a voter. Emma's going to be talking with you. So she's more clever than I am and will ask better questions. But what we're going to do is we're going to try and create an engaging experience in this. We'll talk a little bit about HR, and largely this means asking you questions about HR and us talking about the results as we get them. And then we'll switch over to the things that I do know a bit about, and that's the AI world. And so what I'll try and share is what I've learned about this cool technology and the things we're doing in the AI field, and how those are starting to be applied to HR, and how you might be able to leverage that in the future. So I think the thing that we're going to start off with here is a question. So if you should all be on the app, you should see everything pulled up there. Cool. So Emma is going to ask the first question. I believe the first question is, if we switch over to the next slide. So we're going to ask you the question, what does employee engagement mean to you? So I've learned a lot of different definitions. And so I'm curious what a group of people who are HR experts, what you have to say about this. So Emma, do you want to go ahead and send that off and give it 2.5 minutes maybe? Awesome. So while that's coming in, I'll explain a little bit of what is going on. So what's happening is you are probably seeing a open text box. In that text box, you're going to be inputting your responses. And as soon as you click send on your response, you should start seeing pairs of other people's responses. And so your job's simple here. You're just supposed to vote. So you want to choose between those pairs as many times as you can before the timer counts down. And while you are voting, we're going to be learning about what you're thinking. So I'll try not to distract you too much with thoughts here while things are coming in.
That's really an interesting point, Andrew. Why do we use two boxes? What's the sort of rationale and the clever bit behind that?
Yeah, so there's actually two clever bits, right? So one of them is the bit of how do we understand people better? If I ask you a question and you give me your answer, that gives me what your immediate reaction is. But if I'm asking you about what's important relative to the benefits you care about, or what's troubling you at work, or what can make your life better, there's a good chance that other people are going to come up with things and say things that are even better answers and more relevant to you than what you said. And so by showing you what other people say and having you vote on that, that gives me a lot more information about how you're thinking than just what you say. So that's one answer. The second answer actually goes back to our origins, I guess probably 3.5 years ago, where we didn't think at all about business. Admittedly, we were just nerds trying to build cool AI stuff. And what we wanted to do was gamify this process. We wanted to do it in a way where we found people having fun while they were participating. And we found something about being able to read other people's opinions and make a quick choice based on that, created an engaging experience that I guess now has become a benefit to us later on in the game.
Oh, that's great. So it kind of like gives you consensus between your sentiment and your colleague's sentiment, and the good ideas bubble to the top.
Yep, that's exactly right. So cool. I'm going to pull up the results here. So we asked, what does employee engagement mean to you? So the first response that we have from the group here is employees are motivated to do their best. They believe in the organization's culture and values and are committed to the organization's goals. Another response here at the top is employees who are involved, contributing, and growing. Employees excited about their work and willing to give an extra effort. So I think certainly all great responses and ones that I've felt and learned early on. So in the world of AI and physics, you'll meet a lot of really engaged people. So admittedly, physics does not pay well. And so the only people you're left with doing it are people who are insanely excited and engaged with that particular topic. Now, as we built the company, Remesh, that you're on, we learned that not everybody is always as excited about what they're doing as physicists trying to solve a physics problem. And so I think this captures it well, because if I look at each of these things, they are a perfect description of an excited scientist who can't wait to do work on their problem. And I think when we talk about engagement, what we mean is how do we foster that excitement towards the things you're working on, towards the vision you're executing towards for your employees or in your company.
Okay, so I think we'll probably dive into how you're getting those real-time insights a little bit later into the presentation. And I think if we can look at the next chart, and there will be a follow-up question based on these statements. So we partnered with Gartner. They give us great insights into how we approach companies, what problems we can solve. Here are a number of statements that we believe are true from our trusted advisor, and we are curious to understand, are they representative of your experience within your organization? So Emma, if you could ask the next question, I think that really gives our participants and audience an opportunity to be able to give us some opinion on that, which would be great insight for us.
Yeah, so I mean, just to kind of highlight these stats as you're answering. So the first one is that 65% of employees are thinking about changing companies, which is incredible. That means over 50% of the people currently working for your company are thinking about switching to a different company. The second is that 54% feel low energy and enthusiasm in their work. This means that when they come to work, they aren't enthused and their energy level is low, which doesn't seem very positive. 17% are willing to make a significant discretionary effort, which means that only 17% of people are kind of in the mindset of going out of their way to dig in and really execute on something. And so we're curious, is this something that really represents all of you? Is there a disconnect, or are kind of everybody on the same page here? Interesting. Well, so results in, so 50% of people agree, 32% of people strongly agree, slightly agree, sorry. So puts us somewhere about, say most of you tend to agree with this. So I guess this means we are in a situation where most of those here whose job it is to create an engaging environment are understanding that this is a serious challenge and one that potentially is not fully tackled yet. So you want to click on to the next thing here, Jeff? So here's a statement of engagement that I think we tend to think about, which is, I think, quite on par with what you all said. And that is that employee engagement is an emotional state where we feel passionate, energetic, and committed to our work. And in turn, we fully invest our best selves, our hearts, our spirits, minds, and hands in the work that we do.
So, Andrew, I think that's pretty much evidenced in how we use Remesh internally. So we have a very high cadence of usage of Remesh. We run regular sessions on a Friday, but everybody internally has access to the platform and can spin up a conversation with our colleagues, frankly, at any time we want. So if we've got a problem that we're trying to resolve, and we might have writer's block or some kind of other challenge that we're struggling to get around, kind of reaching out and understanding, what the consensus is around that particular problem and getting some help. I think, one of the big advantages that I see is you can actually drive a very high cadence of communication and not just, a quarterly survey or an annual survey, after kickoff or whatever that event may be.
Yeah, totally. So I think, we'll dive into a little bit more details around. So we use our own product all the time. We're kind of obsessed with it, which I think probably we should be. And what this means is that we've got some interesting lessons, I guess, experiential lessons of what we found has worked for us. And so we'll certainly move into those here shortly. So before we dig into that, I want to get a little bit of a better understanding from your perspective. What are the biggest challenges that you face? So I know mine. I won't tell those as to skew the data quite yet. But what are the challenges that you face in terms of employee engagement? Is it trying to understand what makes employees feel engaged? Is it finding a way to measure engagement? Is it finding a way to think about engagement, to talk about engagement? Is it simply finding employees who are the type of people who are engageable or the people likely to be engaged? So Emma, if you want to fire off that question, we'll give you 2 minutes and 30 seconds to respond to this one. So remember, just type in your answer. You'll immediately see others when you click send and vote until the time runs out. All right, so I'll kind of chat through these as they're coming in. So the first answer I just saw coming here was constant threat of restructure. So we can certainly speak to this one from our world. So we're obviously a growing company. I think we've doubled in size in the past 6 months and very well may in the next 6 months, which means we're in a constant state of the structure of the company changing. Now, I'm sure many of you experience this on 1,000 times the scale that we do, but certainly there's a concern that arises of it, which is, who am I responsible to? What am I responsible for? What is the vision I'm helping execute on? And when you get lack of clarity around those things, it's hard to get a person excited about a thing they don't know or a future that they can't see. Lack of frequent recognitions is currently on top. Not enough manpower to act on insights and improve areas of engagement. Long turnaround times to get results. Certainly one that we've seen by ones that we've seen by the people who tend to use us is they want to reduce that long results. Employees don't always feel heard. Middle management, the frozen middle, yep. Lack of communication, yeah, so that one's, I think, huge. Unless you're a physicist, it turns out you can, oftentimes we will live in a bubble and still be super excited, but I think it's often important to communicate in order to create that. Sorry if you're hearing some loud pops. We're tripping over ourselves a little bit with cables. We're not experienced people chatting here. Cool, so 14 more seconds. I won't ramble the whole time, I promise. I'll wait for results to come in.
Emma, could you tip just a very simple yes/no question, which is, does everybody who's participating feel that they have a seat at the table in this conversation? I think that would be a really interesting bit of a quick insight.
Yeah, certainly. Cool. All right, so results are in. I'll just chat through these a little bit. So overcoming poor culture and employee grudges against the organization created by past management. Certainly one I guess I can't completely speak to because we've been the same management since we started, but certainly one that we've encountered in many of our customers. My understanding is this usually looks something like Bob came into work, created a toxic work environment. Bob has now been left and been replaced by Sally. Sally's awesome, but everyone's salty and upset and not really into their job because Bob just made everything not fun. So that's an important challenge. So how do you refresh? How do you, I guess, reinvigorate or reset after a toxic person? Lack of communication, we talk through, not enough manpower to act, employees not feeling heard, which is, we'll certainly talk through this one when we talk about how we use Remesh at our company, which is very much to address that point. Converting research into action, which we're still seeing this conversion into action, getting everyone to participate, which is often both a symptom and an effect, symptom and a cause of lack of engagement, I think. Getting CEO commitment, not just support. Socialization in a remote work environment, which we have, so I can speak a little bit to that. And measuring engagement, just to name kind of the top ones coming through here. So on the topic of measuring engagement, we, again, pulled a little bit of data here from DecisionWise. What we wanted to know was, how are people measuring engagement? And if you look at this survey here, interestingly, top option, online survey. Surprisingly, second option is a paper survey, which is a little bit hard to stomach as a technologist. Third is focus groups, which we certainly see, personal interviews, and then a few others. And I think one of the things that I just reviewed this data maybe about 30 minutes ago that threw me off, to be honest, is when we were starting the company and trying to get our hands on what makes engagement and what doesn't, we went around and we asked people, what does answering a survey from your employer make you feel engaged, make you feel neutral, or make you feel disengaged? And what we largely found is that for most people, when they are sent a survey that they have to answer kind of by themselves, on demand of their manager, they feel disengaged. Troubling, given that the top way that we're measuring engagement is an online survey. This means if you put this together, the very thing that we're even doing to try to measure engagement is potentially harming it. Now, I think there's some awesome other ways to measure this, or even better survey approaches than maybe all, but certainly what we've seen to learn is that the survey itself, while useful and giving good data potentially, oftentimes begins that culture of you work for me rather than we're all in this together to accomplish this goal. So actually, again, we'll go back, putting a lot of things in the bin of things we'll chat about, learning, just doing this ourselves, but how we measure engagement has been a little bit different since we learned this.
So I think we've got another quick question coming up, which is really to get some feedback from our participants. just to do a bit of a check in terms of whether the experience with those participants maps against that research. So what methods or tools for measuring employee engagement did your organization use or has used?
Yeah, so part of this is just level setting on, is your guys' experience similar to the data that we've got? And the second is just to get an idea of what are you using? Is it working? Is it something that you're, is it surveys? Have you found a pulse product that works really well for you that your employees actually love? So I'm curious how you measure it. So as a scientist, we often will say something you're not able to measure isn't worth trying to improve. And I think that certainly on the employee engagement front, this is an important piece, right? We've created deeper engagement. What does that mean? How do I measure that? How do I turn that into a number that I can say, actually, our engagement is increasing, right? So I know in some conversations we've had around this, people will talk about simply doing an annual engagement survey. So once a year, they're going to check in with their employees and see where they're at. And that check-in is going to tell them on that day when they answered that survey, how are they feeling? Which admittedly might not be the best proxy for how people feel over time. We've had people say, well, really, we look at retention. Retention for us is a good proxy for engagement. For retaining people, we assume they're engaged, and that might be true. All right, cool. So I'm going to start chatting through some of the results we're seeing here. So interestingly, paper and online surveys is the top here, and that makes sense, consistent with the data. Annual employee engagement surveys, pulse check-ins when needed, questionnaire on an annual basis, pushing the save 12 questions, an always on feedback tool. That's cool. Pretty standard stuff, surveys, one-on-one interviews. Awesome. So it seems like you guys are thinking is pretty consistent with what we've been learning, which is the methods of market research, largely being online surveys, a mix of focus groups, and a little bit of measuring some always-on data is what you're using. So good to know. And I guess for those of you that do all those things, rest assured that it seems like all of your colleagues are taking similar approaches. Can we ask a quick question, maybe make it a poll question, which is, do you think the insights you get from the method that you use is what you need? So just trying to get to, are the approaches that people are using, the annual engagement surveys, the pulse check, are these things that are giving you the guidance to say, well, here's how we need to adjust, here's how we need to correct, here's how we need to change what we're doing in order to increase engagement? I don't know the answer to, so I guess
let's find out.
I'll hold out for your responses. And while you're doing that, I will just take a quick gander through some of your answers here. Yes, lots of online surveys. I see exit interviews in here. After people leave, figure out why. Online surveys, pretty standard stuff. Yeah, so pretty clear that online surveys, main ones, weekly one-on-one sessions with manager, awesome. I like to do that. Cool. All right, so it seems like we're gonna have a mix of things here. A few yeses, few nos. I see yes along with discussions, which I interpret to mean you get your data points, but then you want to still have a conversation with your employees to gain context. Somewhat, some people have complaints, but no suggestions for improvement. I know this one well. I'll again chat through a little bit of how we learned how to deal with this one. No, hopefully that doesn't retain the top response. So Jeff, are you able to show them what I'm seeing here? Or I guess, yeah, so just so you guys know what's going on my side. As you guys are typing in and responding, I'm seeing this representative set of your responses, and it's going to adjust and change as you're voting because things are getting re-ranked. But this is what's letting me have an idea of where your minds are at as you're typing this. And I want to do this because you know, be up to date with what you're thinking. but just thought you should know that my ramblings aren't totally random, but based on what you guys are saying. Sometimes I think, so top answer right now is sitting at, sometimes I think it would be better to understand not just individuals, but understand more of a group dynamic, insights about the direction of my company. See it becoming a number game. Cool, so are we, just so you guys know, I'm not talking to a magic genie. I'm chatting with Emma here, who has slides and things queued up. What is coming up next here? Got it. Okay, cool. So I think we touched on this a little bit. Do we have a question that's going to go along with this? A poll question? Cool. So if you go back to that data, yeah, thanks, Jeff. So how often do you measure? So this is a question we ask relative to what we just talked about. So we figured out, here's the tools you're using, and to some of you, they seem good. So sometimes, maybe sometimes they're not. But now if we're talking about doing these measurements, we're curious of how often do you measure? So this is, again, data from DecisionWise, and they found that annually is the most common piece here. So people seem to always do things annually. I see a few here every 2 years, which I think is wild. Some quarterly, some monthly, some weekly. So I can certainly tell you we're in the weekly bin. And we'll chat a little bit more about that once we go through here. So Emma, would you fire off the next question here, which is how frequently do you measure employee feedback? Also, I guess just a note while you're answering this, because it should be a simple poll question. So an interesting mix-up, I think, just happened that is awesome. So that is that we were going to ask you, I think we were going to ask you a poll question around, does the method that you're doing meet your needs? And Emma asked it as an open-ended question. Well, it turns out what I learned from that was not that, yes, 38% of you meet needs, but I learned a lot more than that. I learned an answer that is sometimes, but with additional color that I think it would be better to understand not just individuals, but understand more of a group dynamic and insights about the direction of my company, which I guess just points to why potentially polls aren't always the best questions to ask. So
that's interesting.
We say that as we ask you, poll. We're not perfect. Cool. So just giving you guys back answers here. So how frequently do you measure employee engagement? So top answer was annually. 35% of you said this. Wow. 20% of you said never. 20% of you said every 1 or more years. And a few people doing this at a higher frequency. So seems like we're not all doing extremely well at high frequency engagement measurements. Although if we were all going to be measuring by surveys that made people feel disengaged, then maybe that's a reasonable trade-off. So I think, are you?
This is a real fun question. So I'd ask everybody who's participating to dial this number up or down according to the size of your organization. But if you were given $10 million to spend on employee engagement, what would you spend it on?
So this is what we're trying to get at, I think, is clearly budgets are a constraint, right? They are with us, they are with everybody. And that often means that how we think is, how do I not rock the boat too much? How do I change things in very small ways to achieve something? And what I'm curious about is, let's take the budget off the table. Let's say that's not what your concern is, but now your job is to think critically about how can I, if I had resources, how could I create engagement? And our hope, I guess, fingers crossed, we won't know till everyone's answered here, is might that give us some interesting insights around how we should be creating engagement? Or for people like me who like to build AI to automate things, is there a way to take that learning and potentially create a more efficient approach that allows you to do that, but not for $10 million? So we certainly won't charge that. Cool, so just seeing a few answers coming in here. Employee development is currently at the top. which is investing in your employees, I think is awesome. A better LMS and HRIS to ensure employees are connected, training is consistent. Wages, benefits, bonuses. So basically, can we give people more, and does that create engagement? Actually, so someone might fact check me here. I remember reading a study that they looked at this, and surprisingly, the answer was above a threshold no, that kind of once you pass the standard of living threshold, you actually, at some point there became a negative correlation between pay and engagement at the same job title, right? Obviously, as you go up, things change. But that might be it. Yeah, better engagement mechanics, investing in platforms that allow employees to be heard and see the outcomes of their messaging. So question is, are we gonna, I've been like holding off on talking about what we do here, which is painful. But that's AI's next? Okay, cool. So I guess we'll keep holding off on that a little bit longer. Chat about AI. So I guess this chapter of our conversation here, the goal was really to engage you all and get an idea of how you're thinking. If we were deeper experts in HR, which like I said, I feel like expert in AI, still learning about HR, then I would be using everything you've said to give you the wisdom I could around it. Now AI is where I feel more confident here. So we'll chat a little bit now about AI. So abrupt transition, put the HR on hold. We'll come back to it because we're going to mix it with AI. So let's just talk a little bit about artificial intelligence. So just read a definition we have here. So artificial intelligence makes it possible for machines to learn from experiences, adjust to new inputs, and perform human-like tasks. When it comes down to it, when we think about AI, or when I think about AI, to me, it's a combination of two things. So one is it's an intelligent algorithm. That means it's an algorithm that has these properties. It can learn, it can adapt, it can adjust, and it can generalize. But it also means that I'm going to apply it to something that humans do. And the reason I'm going to do that is to do a few things. One, if I apply AI to do something humans do, it's going to add an efficiency. If I require a human to do something 1,000 times and I can train an AI to do it, now that 1,000 times can compact in 2 seconds. The second is that it will reduce costs because if I can have an AI do it, it's much cheaper. And you might think that the result of this is, well, let's just replace all of our employees. And that's not what we're saying. Instead, what we're saying is that what AI is going to do is let you unlock the ability to do things that you currently couldn't. It's the ability to let you do the things that you think cost $10 million to do, but that are actually quite accessible and quite achievable if we use technology. Now, admittedly, where AI is from a research perspective, so what the academics are doing working on it is not nowhere near what we're seeing yet implemented in kind of your day-to-day operations. But few points here on the state of AI. So one is that fast back 4 or 5 years, and no one was really thinking about or talking about AI. Go one slide forward, please. So no one was talking about AI. Now we've reached a point where many executives are highly aware that this is a thing that they need to think about. And to them, largely, this means efficiency, which means being able to do things for less money in a short amount of time. So 80% of executives believe AI boosts efficiency or boosts productivity. And there's a report that 13.6 million new jobs will be created over the next decade due to AI. Won't stake my hat on the number necessarily, what the net will be there, but certainly it will be a totally new set of skills. The cool part is we're in this exciting time where it hasn't really been applied to everything, and the places where it's been applied have not really been adopted, and they especially have not been adopted in large enterprises. And so just to give you a bit of an idea of the places where people are applying AI in enterprise as it relates to HR, I'll kind of take you through a few points here. So the first is recruiting. So recruiting is, I think of as matchmaking. There's a giant pool of people who want to be hired, there's a smaller pool of people who want to hire people. And you want to make the matches where the person you match with for your company is going to be the most engaged, the best fit, and the most productive for that role. And what AI is doing is being able to take its experience, take all the data it's gathering as people join your company, turn over after 5 years, and repeat that over and over and over across thousands of different companies to learn the patterns of what a person looks like, what their demographic profile is, or what their experience in schooling is, that's going to make them be a strong fit for your company. And so this is a thing that used to require an army of people and an incredibly laborious process to scan through tons and tons and tons of resumes. And what AI is doing is eliminating the first step of that funnel. So obviously you won't hire a person without chatting with them. What it does is eliminate that first step of the funnel where you just have to wade out all of the junk or all of the noise. On the learning front, there's two pieces here. So one is to figure out what people might be good at learning. So I won't go too depth there. The second is understanding what version of a lesson, what version of something you're going to teach is best suited for an individual person. I'll roll through a few of these a little quicker. I'm getting a time check here. So video interviews is something that's been automated by AI from the perspective of turning voice into text, turning images of a face into emotion, and allowing you to process that at scale. Sourcing allows you to price match and find the best pieces of software for you. So this is, think suggestions like Amazon does for your software. Career management, which was beginning to predict and tell you what track to put an employee on that maximizes their likelihood of success. Sentiment analysis, which is going to allow you to listen to all of the data being generated to understand how sentiment is changing. And employee feedback, which is the one that we care a lot about and think the most about. So with that, am I now allowed to chat about how we use it? Cool. So I've kind of been alluding to all of this along the way. So I guess I'll set this up like this. So when we started the company, what we wanted to do was we were thinking market research. So we weren't admittedly even thinking, hey, let's use our product to engage employees. But what we found is as you grow as a company, things aren't perfect. So sometimes it seems there's some bad vibes and people aren't working effectively, or people don't necessarily feel bought in, whatever it may be. So what we started doing is so the very platform that at least a few of you have been responding on here, we started every Friday. We would have a 30-minute session. Usually I would lead it. Other times, other managers from our company would lead it. And what we would do is this would allow us to have a live, engaging conversation with our employees. And so through these, I'm able to get an idea of what employees are thinking. So I usually start by asking a question of what is on the top of your mind, and whether it's awesome, which often it is, or if there's a problem that no one was willing to tell me directly. This allows me to understand the truth. What is really giving people problems? Second cool thing that started happening is as I have to make important decisions about how the company grows, what direction we go, how we approach problems, I started asking about these in our Friday sessions. So I would ask, what's the best approach you would see to this? Or so if we're going to try to achieve this, how do we best do this? Who should help us do this? And what we found is that our employees are the ones who come up with the solutions. They're often exactly what I'm thinking or better, and everyone's bought in. And so it's interesting that this experience of them connecting with me through these live sessions created an environment of buy-in into the very important decisions we were making, and buy-in into the vision, which meant that people were automatically more engaged and more willing to work on it. I think the second component of this is that because every Friday, every employee knows that they're going to be able to have their voice heard, it means that no one feels like they're being left out. And through these sessions, I learn all this feedback. and we talk about immediately when it's done how we're going to implement it. So I think this has led us to do things from change our daily stand-ups, which we've been evolving based on feedback. It's given us feedback on how we improve the culture for our employees. So things that might not be obvious, that is important to have days where people had parties, or days where we had our employees meet with people from the outside. So things that to me were not obvious, but our entire group of employees thought was really important, were things that we would do with kind of just as they asked us. And all of this together meant that we were creating a system where employees were bought in because they were part of decision making. There was transparency in why decisions were made. They were able to surface problems that exist in any company so that we could address those problems head on when they happened, so they wouldn't exist for more than a week without us knowing about it. They were able to help us create the expectation that you'll always be part of the team. And as a result, I think it generates an environment where you get a incredibly high degree of engagement, both during the session and as a part of culture as a result of it. So since we started doing these internally, we've now started working with a few of the largest consulting companies in the world doing employee engagement, and they've started themselves using it, I would say, even more cleverly than we did initially, because they know what matters. Multiple Fortune 500 companies doing the same thing. And they just showed me a case study. All right, so I'll chat you through a quick case study here. Simon, do you want to take us through this case study?
Yeah, so this was, so the first thing we should say, we are highly respectful of the data that we manage on behalf of our customers. We never reveal who our customers are. So you'll never see a customer page with us naming who those customers are. But generically, this is a customer that was in the aviation space. They wanted to understand how content their employees were. They used Remesh to engage, I think, up to 300 people. That was a mixture of different disciplines, and they talked about a number of different topics using open-ended questions. One of the things that they kind of knew that existed was that there was some discontent amongst the employees, but really they couldn't understand specifically why. They knew that there was some points of friction between the operational teams and non-operational teams, which I think is, that I've seen within my career, the sort of rub between product and sales and product and operations. But what they actually found out throughout the conversation, they actually got down to what those specifics were and actually came away with some actionable items. So they're now actually running an internal campaign that actually, addresses those specific items to improve those working relationships.
Cool. So this has been enough talking from us. We're going to do a few things here. So one, we're going to ask, so you've probably been seeing, we're using this platform to get your feedback. What we want to know is what you want to know. And so I think we're going to ask you a question of, what question would you like us to ask your fellow HR professionals? So what are you curious about how your colleagues think about this world? So Emma, do you want to fire that one off? Cool. And while you are answering that, it's the next thing that we're going to ask you. So we'll actually ask you the question that you want us to ask. I think we have about 10 minutes remaining here. So you'll tell us what question you want to ask you. We'll ask it. And then if we have time, I'll have any questions that you want me to answer. So again, I preface this with, as you can probably see, we're a little bit new to called the HR and engagement world, though I think really big companies use us for that purpose. But we definitely have a different insight in it because we've approached it with ignorance, which meant we didn't know what the standard approaches were to begin with. We weren't certain, we didn't assume anything already worked super well. We had people tell us, hey, your stuff you made for doing market research, we found our employees think it's super engaging. So I remember even when we started doing this, when Simon first joined the company, I brought him to a session where employees had a conversation with their CEO. And I remember Simon got super excited because everybody clapped when the session was over. And his comment to me was, well, I guess I can't say the explicit words, but holy moly, I've never seen someone clap, a group of employees clap after a engagement with their CEO. So I think there's certainly something here. And
Slight correction.
Yeah.
Clap after, a survey of a different kind. But
yeah, true. Yeah. Cool. Okay. So, awesome questions. Better than I would have come up with. What strategies do you use to get management to buy in?
That's a good one.
Yeah, that's a really good one. Learned this one quite well. So Emma, do you want to, as soon as that, whatever comes in top, you want to just copy paste that and send it back out? Cool. All right, so what strategies do you use to get management to buy in? So we're gonna swing that back at you and ask you, what strategies do you use to get management to buy in? Simon, what have you used to get management to buy into things in the past?
Data.
Data.
Data to build evidence-based decision making.
And what would you want to find evidence of?
So in my world, I'd want to find evidence of, so in sales, it's very important to understand, is there value in what we're asking our customers to use? It's very important to understand what value we create for our customers and being able to quantify that. And, it's very important to understand, if we white space the opportunity in partnership with that customer, and apply the sort of metrics that we find from, some early testing. If we apply those metrics right the way across the organization, then if we can come up with some value statements from the executive team that, will outline some kind of return on investment, that's very important. So, all of those decisions for me, in terms of building this sort of, the business from a sales side, those are very important messages for me to be able to build those persuasive arguments within the
C-suite. Which it seems like certainly the top ones here. So demonstrate the impact on the bottom line. Bottom line, I interpret as savings, cost savings. Certainly increasing retention alone will do it. Increasing engagement. I remember a statistic, it's about 2 years old now, that somewhere in the world of about $500 billion in productivity is lost every year due to disengaged employees. Quite a lot of money. Demonstrate impact, remind them how expensive and time consuming it is to hire new people and replace volunteer turnover. Good question. What was that, Emma? Cool, that's good. And so I'm not sure if we communicated this, but all of the results of this we'll give you. So we'll follow up with a link that'll give you the analyst view, which I haven't really dove much into, but this is going to allow you to slice and dice the data, look at it from a few different ways, and see how your fellow HR professionals are thinking here. Interesting. All right. So no consensus on the best way to get management to buy in, which is interesting. All right. I think last question here is a question for me, which is what questions for me do you have?
Yeah. So if we could ask our participants to ask Andrew a question, what would you?
Or you, Simon.
Or me. Yeah. What would you like to know?
Cool. And I'll try and answer them as they come in if possible. Unless you have more questions, in which I'll make up an answer to an unknown question. Data, data, data. Lots of data. Demonstrate impact. Show ROI. Remind them the cost of not doing it.
Yes, opportunity cost.
Cool. Okay, so I'll start answering these. So first question rolling in is, do you work only in the HR sphere? Quick answer is no. So we're used, I would say 60% of our business or so more is market research. So that's not engaging with your employees, but engaging with your customers. Turns out being able to do that in a matter of a 30-minute session to make a decision is valuable, just like it is for employees. Apologies for the siren if you're hearing it.
This is New York City.
Yeah, we're in the middle of New York City, so you'll get that. See, question here, how long does it take to get your platform up and running? The answer is about a half hour. So we would create an account, do a quick training session with one of our customer success people, and that's about it. So it's very quick to get up and running, and say that you don't have to be an expert. We like to think build it so our grandma can use it.
I think that was a really interesting one. What was the greatest upgrade that we've had? I just saw it flash up and it's disappeared now, but it might come back. So it might be an opportunity just to talk about what our capabilities are today and what we're building towards.
Yeah, sure. So I think probably one of the biggest upgrades, and this was very early on in our days, was being able to integrate other data on the participant. So if you notice, Jeff, if you want to click on one of these, doesn't matter which one here. So Jeff will bring it up. So what we thought, all we want to know is what does a whole group of people think. But we learned early on that what we need to do is actually be able to integrate other data on participants, like what line of business they're in or where they work at. So in this case, Jeff's going to be able to say, okay, I want to look at people who have companies where those companies are of the size of, say, between 1 and 200 people. And now you're able to see the answer that best represents that group. You can stack these together and do it for different lines of business. So for example, I collect from my employees, are they on the product side of our business or are they on the business side of it? And that lets me see how opinions differ. So I think that was one of the most impactful ones because it allowed you to have one single 30-minute session with everyone. And then when the session was over, dig into it to understand how different lines of business or how different segments of people were thinking about things.
So what's the capacity in terms of the number of people that can participate on the platform today? And where do you see that?
Yeah, so right now we're about 1,000 people can participate simultaneously. Where our goal is to get that to about 10,000 before the year's out. And from there, the next goal will be 1 million, which will probably take about another year from there.
Great.
Yep. I guess just checking a few more questions here. Can you discuss more the internal culture sessions and what is involved? So these internal culture sessions are, we do them Friday at 12 o'clock. They replace our Friday stand-up. The whole team, everyone who's in our New York office joins us in kind of one place. Those who are remote, join it remote. We will put on a audio feed, so the ability for me to kind of talk while we're doing it. We'll ask, as people on board, so as they join in the session, they'll answer a few survey questions, so we know what department they're in, how happy they are, things like this, which should answer the question about anonymity. So everyone's anonymous except for the demographic data. And then we basically just have a conversation. So we template it out a little bit. So I want to ask the same kind of questions around what do you care about? What are you concerned about? But from there, we adapt and adjust. So if I learn that what people are concerned about, so this is one that happened a few weeks ago, people are concerned about the efficiency of our stand-up, which is this daily 15-minute meeting we do to get everyone on sync. And so once I learned that, we spent the rest of that session digging into and understanding what about it wasn't working, what ideas do employees have for improving it. And after that, we ended up doing a 2-week experiment where I had a new employee each day run the stand-up themselves in the way that they wanted to. So I think that for us, the important point is a little bit of it is pre-planned, but a lot of it is us adapting and adjusting to what we're learning as we're learning it. And so I think that's my favorite part of the platform is that you ask a question, 2 minutes later, you know the answer, and that means you can decide what you want to ask next. And can, by the time it's over, know what kind of actions you want to take, communicate those actions back so that you can start building the feedback loop, and do it. And it only takes a half hour, which.
So talking of which, I think we're at the top of the hour. So we should really thank everybody for participating. And I know we didn't get to all of those questions, but we will endeavor to take a look at these and potentially bullet point some answers back that we can share with you. You have our contact details. So if you want to talk directly and ask us any more questions, we'd be more than happy to talk. So thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.